Episodes of the Green Corn Rebellion Show are sponsored by Oklahoma Progress Now. Oklahoma Progress Now is a 501c4 organization focused on building progressive power in Oklahoma. Their primary efforts are on developing progressive content for a 21st century audience, coalition, and capacity building across progressive organizations and causes, and working to see elected leaders who are more responsive to their constituents and the needs of the many. Areas of focus include progressive messaging and communications, coalition building and resource sharing, and focused progressive policy goals. You can check out their Twitch live streams, and they go live on Facebook on at noon, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Please support this organization. It's a really great organization. It's just getting started here in Oklahoma. Thank you. Now enjoy the rest of the video. Right. Hello, this is the Green Corn Rebellion Show. I'm Gregory Harden II, and today I'm here with Danyell Lanier. She is running for Congress in Oklahoma's 2nd Congressional District. How are you doing today?
I am fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Where are you from and where did you grow up at?
Okay. Yes, I'm a native Oklahoman. I was born in Tahlequah. I'm actually a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, but I was raised down in southeastern Oklahoma, raised in Hugo, which is down by the Texas border. We kind of call it Little Dixie, and that's where I grew up and graduated from high school.
That's cool. I haven't met a whole lot of people from that area actually. So,
Really? Where are you
yeah.
located?
I'm from Shawnee, which is surprising, right? Because,
Yeah.
it's near Little Dixie, but like I know plenty of people, like I think Ada would be considered Little Dixie, correct? So I've known plenty of
Right.
people from there, but not
Yeah.
further south Oklahoma. So, yeah.
So you stop knowing people where Ada cuts off and just ends right there.
Yes. Like I had a teacher that moved from whenever I had them, they lived in Del City, then they moved to Chishmingo. Now they live
Hmm.
in Texas. But other than that, no, I've met very few people from down that way. Um, let's see. Second question I have here is, so you were in the Navy. What made you want to serve your country in the Navy?
When I was in high school in 1994, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to get out of Hugo, and I knew that somewhere out there was life outside of Hugo, the Hugo city limits, and I wanted to see what it was. College at the time, my family, they were like, oh, you should go be a nurse. You should, go to college and make something of yourself. But a young lady of color coming up in the 90s and even now, you are told that you need to make a living. If I had to flash back, I really wanted to become an archaeologist. I love rocks, or I wanted to do an anthropologist or something. And during that time, nobody was pressing that to say, you can do that. It is possible for you to do that. So instead, I just figured I got to get out of here. I need to see what's beyond, my surroundings. So I chose to join the Navy at the time. And as soon as I graduated from high school in May, I was gone in July. And I went to boot camp in Orlando, graduated from there, ended up in Mississippi for my schooling. And then I caught a plane over to Guam. And I was in Guam for 9 months, stayed there, came back to Mississippi, which is where I was actually in Homeport at. And then from there, I went to Spain for another year.
That's
So,
cool.
yeah, best decision I could have ever made.
All right. So what has made you want to run for Congress?
It's time. That's the best way that I can put that. It's time. There's an entire group of people, and not even just talking about people of color, but we're also talking about women. We're talking about just people that's being ignored. Our voices are being ignored. And I want to represent those people that feel like they don't have a voice. That's that really the best way I can describe that. Living here in Hugo, my mother had a stroke, and she almost didn't make it. Had we not took her to Texas, over to Dallas, to maybe a larger facility that wasn't overburdened, to kind of get the care that she needed, she might not be here, or she may have not recovered the way that she did. And when that happened, I started looking around like, why are all the hospitals around us closing? Why are they overburdened like they are? And I'm like, why won't somebody do something? And then at the in the time in the moment, I'm like, I am somebody. So what solidified that for me was I was on a pharmacy run for my mom one day picking up her medication at my local Walmart. And when I was in line at the pharmacy, there was a lady in front of me. And at Walmart, you can have food items in your basket and you can check out in pharmacy with that too. So she had her food in the basket. And when they went to check her out, they told her how much her prescription was, and she put her food back.
Wow.
And watching that, I was like, ma'am, I'm happy. She just had ground beef and like hamburgers, the stuff to make the hamburgers, and you could tell what she was gonna cook. So I was like, ma'am, I'm happy to pay for that for you if you don't mind. And I went to go, hand her some cash, but we're Oklahomans, we have our pride. So she was like, no, thank you. And that broke my heart. I don't know how else to say that, but it angered me, but it also broke my heart that so many of us take things like that for granted. That, there is somebody in line at a grocery store making life choices on whether I'm going to eat or I'm going to have my medication. And that really solidified my run. I was like, I got to do something. Win, lose, draw, whatever, people need to know that there are folks out here that are battling with that. We need to draw attention to that. And that's what solidified me to hop in the race. The last time that a woman held this seat for Oklahoma's District 2 was in 1921.
Wow. I wouldn't have even um, known that long ago. At least
Yeah,
that's
100
20 years,
years.
100 years. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it's too long.
it is.
Yeah. So on your website, you said you're in favor of criminal justice reform. Could you talk about the importance of why we need to do that, and what are some of the things that we need to do in order to enact it?
Yes. So that's a great topic to talk about. When we're talking about criminal justice reform, there are a few dynamics or layers to that, especially coming from Oklahoma, and that's mainly where I want to zoom in with that question. Oklahoma is one of the top states of people that are incarcerated. We don't even have a large population, but we have one of the largest of incarcerated individuals. And I'm not going to even go into the fact that we have mainly the majority of incarcerated women and incarcerated people of color. So, without actually drawing out the statistics. And we'll also throw in there that we are a large private prison organization. That's a huge moneymaker for Oklahoma as well. And for those that may not know exactly what a private prison is, it is not necessarily state funded. It's where corporations get together and they run the prison like it's a business. And a lot of times inside of those prisons, they will have the prisoners making products that actually may get sold to a distributor. So, for instance, let's say they may have the prisoners in there making clothes that in turn will be distributed to your local stores, department stores to be sold. And those prisoners are making pennies on the dollar. So, whereas in a factory, those clothes may be getting made, they have to pay those people 10, 12, $15 an hour. When you have prisoners making those clothes, you save money because you don't have to pay them that type of wage. So that's to kind of put that into perspective as to why it's a moneymaker. On top of that, there are companies that run the private prisons. They actually trade on the stock market. So when we're talking about criminal justice reform, that's only one small element about it. When you take people of color that may commit a crime, let's say they're a first time offender, they may theft or just something, we can even go with a misdemeanor, or we can go with, let's say, a class C felony. If you were to take that same crime and pair that up against a white person or a non-person of color, their bail is going to be different. So that's for starters. Maybe how they're charged. Sometimes they may add additional charges onto the person of color so that it is a felony, whereas over here it could have been a misdemeanor. Just thinking about back in the 80s and 90s when everybody was getting locked up for marijuana. And now marijuana is legal to a degree in Oklahoma. So what are we going to go back and do about all of those people that caught those cases back in the 90s? So just thinking about that. A lot of times with a person of color, if they're a first time offender, they don't get the option to go through like a deferred adjudication. They don't get the option of having probation. Normally, if this is this person's first crime, basically they're going to try to plead them down or have them take a plea deal where they're going to go do some time, because the majority of people of color can't afford a lawyer. So they're going to end up with a public defender that their whole basis is to build their law career on how many people that they can get to take the plea deal, or how many people that they have gotten off the streets for committing a crime. So those are a lot of components to criminal justice. And we could even go deeper than that when we talk about the people that are innocent that are locked up, that can't afford a lawyer or can't afford representation, or that didn't understand their rights. So, because mental health plays a role in that as well. We're treating mental health in our jails and in our prisons. So for me, those are things that need to be explored. Those are things that need to be looked at. And we need a group, we need leadership that's really going to take that serious enough to say, hey, we got to stop locking up people. Let's look at this. Let's take a step back. Let's overhaul the system and make sure that even if this person did commit a crime or whatever, let's look at the components that's contributing to that. Let's look at the jobs in the area. Let's look at training. Let's look at mental health. There are so many components to that. And for me, I would like to put together task force. I would like to put together organizations that's willing to do that and fight for the federal funding to be able to do these things.
All right. So are you in favor of legalizing marijuana?
Yes.
Okay. And are
Yeah.
you kind of touched on this whenever you were talking, but are you also in favor of freeing the people who are currently in prison because of marijuana possession and expunging their records?
Yes, I am. I am in favor of commuting their sentences and clearing their records and getting it expunged. Yes, I am.
All right. Good to hear. So you talk about investing in America, referring to schools and infrastructure. Do you support things like making college tuition free?
I do. I support free college tuition. I support being able to, and I'm glad you brought that up. You're going to have some people that go to college because they feel the pressure to go to college because their parents or their classmates or whatever are going off to college. And who are you to say, well, I don't want to go.
Hmm.
So but we need to also start looking at other things like our votex, like our trade school apprenticeships. There are a lot of great paying jobs out there that are not asking for a college degree, but rather you can go to training for 9 months, 12 months, 24 months, get a certification and on the job training to be able to do that job. We're always going to need people that are welders. We're always going to need people that work on air conditioners. We're always going to need those jobs, and we need to kind of make that known to people that college is not the only path to success. It is an accolade, but it's not the only path, and we need to start looking at those other paths. I am for definitely free college, especially like working with the community colleges. And in turn, everything can't just be free necessarily. But let's say that if for every free 3 credit hours that you get, maybe you can do 8 hours of community service to kind of pay that back. Maybe you can intern at the college or work in the library or something to kind of be able to have that barter system and kind of give back to the next person so that we don't deplete the funds that would be available or that we don't take advantage of the system. So there has to be a balance in place with that.
All right, cool. Would you support a green jobs program similar to or including the Green New Deal?
Yes, I do. I am in favor of the Green New Deal. I'm gonna be very honest with you. I have not went through and read every single component of it just because I would want to make sure that everything would be viable for Oklahomans. When that was written, it's written for different states, different components, the United States, and the world as a whole. So I would need to make sure that that would be right, or maybe have a revised version of it for Oklahoma just because our terrain, our environment is a little bit different. So we would want it to be a good fit for us. But I am for clean energy. I do believe in climate change. I'm gonna be very honest with you about that. We can tell just by our weather. And people are like, well, climate change has nothing to do with the weather. I know that. But it can influence our weather because of the rising temperature of the earth. So that does everything in nature has a balance, and when we interfere with that, we're going to get the things that we're getting. It's all intertwined, and we cannot deny that.
All right, cool. And do you support raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour?
I do. People need to be able to have a livable wage. And for a lot of states, and Oklahoma is gradually becoming one of it, we have the working homeless, where people are working, but they can't afford to live where they're working, or they're living in their car, or they're in transient housing. That's a big component that we're leaving out. If they don't have an address, or they're couch surfing or something like that, that is still the working homeless. So we need to be able to pay people a livable wage to be able to afford, whether it's a studio apartment, or everybody may not want that. Some people may want to live in like the studio living where they have maid service and their own spot. I don't knock anybody's hustle for where you want to live. You live where your coins will afford for you to live, but we need to be able to provide you with the right kind of coins so that you can afford to live somewhere. So yes, definitely in favor of raising the minimum wage.
Yeah, you bring up something interesting that I've noticed over the last few years, especially here in Shawnee, the working homeless.
Yeah,
There's like, because I used to work in fast food, and you'd have homeless people come in
yeah,
and order something to eat, and they'd come in almost every other day, and
mhm,
like they would have a job, and it wasn't just like they weren't working because they had money, and
right.
it was an interesting. I knew that was like a thing that existed, but
Yeah,
like to just see it almost every day while on the job, it was just like, whoa, like
yeah.
that's a huge problem. Uh,
Right, exactly, because you can't afford to live anywhere. If you're making 8, 9 bucks an hour, after they take taxes or whatever it is, you've put gas in the car, you have bought groceries wherever, whatever it is that you're gonna buy with that. What do you have left over to pay rent, to pay for lights, to pay your internet bill? Because most of us have already turned off the cable. What do you have left over to be able to live somewhere? And a lot of times when you get behind with rent, we know what happens with that. You get behind a month or two, now you're being evicted, and then from there, you have an eviction on your credit. Where are you going to go? Because nobody's going to take you because now you have an eviction. So it's just like a vicious cycle that happens with that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, And you also talk about protecting resources like clean water and also protecting small farms. What are some things you'd like to do in order to protect smaller farms from big corporate farms?
I'm glad you asked that. That is a great question. My family's business, bread and butter, was agribusiness. With my dad was a livestock man. During the wintertime, we took the cows and the pigs to slaughter. They were our pets during the summer when they were being fattened up. But Porky had to go right about November. It was kind of like, deuces, Porky. I love you, but gonna be delicious, come Thanksgiving. So when we kind of look at that, small farms, especially in smaller communities like mine and Hugo, they are the bread and butter for those families. And a lot of times, or what I saw growing up, and even now, is that they may have a small market, or people may come directly to the farm in that community to be able to buy directly from them. And people like that. Everybody may not want to go to Walmart and get their greens. Sometimes they want to go down the street to Mr. John because they know his greens are good, and they're fresh, and they're coming right out the ground. They haven't changed hands 3 or 4 times. And that's still what's taking place. My family, we have a community garden. So when we're looking at protecting the small mom and pop farms, it's important because that is essential to just the American and the Oklahoman way of life. Now, what's happened with that in the middle of that is that, yes, some farms have become incorporated, they have grown, or private business has come in and they have taken over this land, and they're no longer Mr. John's farm. They're now this incorporated farm that has is now being able to mass produce, the meats, or the processing, or mass produce the vegetables that are there. And they're not just supplying the local community. Now they're supplying a couple of counties, or a couple of districts, or part of the state with that. So that is kind of taking away from Mr. John's farm. That's kind of my thing, is I want to protect his farm because he has a right to make a living as well, without being bought out, or without being muscled out by someone larger than that. A great example of that is the CARES and what's happening with COVID. With COVID, a lot of our farms have been starved out because when they set the money aside, they said, okay, we're going to reimburse you back for the monies that you've lost. Box up whatever foods you have, give them to your 501(c)s, and we're going to reimburse you back. Well, when that happened, the money stopped at the big corporate guys. It never made it down to Mr. John's farm. And that's where we're at now, is how did this money stop from the federal government? It's here with these companies that have insurance. They have that cushion to be able to support themselves. And now we're starving Mr. John out.
All right. And in your platform, you talk about improving health, and you talk about lowering drug prices, and also the need to give more people health care, especially in rural Oklahoma, since
Yeah.
the hospitals have been closing down.
Hmm.
Could you talk more about these things and what you'd like to do in order to fix these issues?
I would. I like to kind of explain this where people are like, I get it. And I like to drive the point home to where you understand you are affected. Most the younger generation, I have a 21-year-old daughter, so believe me, she's like, well, I'm not old. I don't need Medicare. It has nothing to do with me. So I have to bring it down, and make it to where she gets it. Okay, when we're talking about Medicare, we're not just talking about senior citizens. When we're talking about Medicare for all, or we're talking about expanding Medicaid, that's everybody. That is not just your senior citizens and taking care of the old people. It has nothing to do with that. It is everybody. So I like to kind of say it like this. Let's say that you are with your family, and maybe your family doesn't make a whole lot of money. Maybe your dad has a job to where they don't provide insurance, or your mom, their job doesn't provide insurance like the rest of us. So now maybe you don't have health insurance. So that means that if you're riding your bike, or you get in a car accident, or something happens to you, you need medical care. A lot of times when you go to the hospital, they're going to do what they need to do to patch you up and make sure that you're okay. But as far as continuous continuity of care after that, it's not going to happen. So that's kind of the importance of having health insurance. Of if you have a toothache, if something is bothering you, you can have that flexibility to go to the doctor, to have a regular doctor that treats you from the time that maybe you're a kid up until the time you're 18. That's your pediatrician that knows when you need shots or vaccinations, that check you to make sure that your weight is consistent with your height, that's checking your back uh, to make sure that you don't have like spina bifida, or to check and see if there's a curve in your spine, just to kind of make sure that you're developing the way that you're supposed to be. You know, when I was growing up, I'm gonna be very honest, we didn't have health insurance. My mom was like, "Do not get out there and get hurt." That was about it. Do not climb that tree because we don't have health insurance. Be riding that bike that fast up and down the street. You know we don't have any insurance. Nope, you're not going out there because we don't have any health insurance. If you get hurt, it's just gonna be too bad. So that's kind of how I was raised. But I don't want, of course, this generation or anybody else to have to live in that fear because they can't afford to go to the doctor. Yeah,
All right. So you do support Medicare for all, and
I
you
do.
also support State Question 802.
Yes. Yes, I
Yes.
do. Oklahoma needs it. A lot of our hospitals have closed up because the doctors aren't able to be paid. There's not enough money to keep them open and keep them functioning. So a lot of them have had to close. And what that does to a community, now you have to drive 50 to 100 miles to get to the next hospital. And guess what? That hospital still has to treat the people in that community. And you're not the only person driving 50 to 100 miles to get to that hospital. The other people that their hospital just closed have to drive to get there too. Some people literally, before they do that, they would say, I would just rather, they just give up and just be like, we're just going to let the Lord do what he's going to do, and I like to keep it honest with that, to where I'm not going to go sit and wait in that doctor's office. It's too much of a burden on me. I'm not going to be asking somebody to drive me 50 miles to my doctor's appointment. It's just, they just give up. And I've actually seen that happen. I had a cousin that died because of that, because he couldn't, here in Hugo, there wasn't a place for him to go get his dialysis. And he got tired of trying to catch a ride, trying to get public transportation to take him over to Texas, because that's where the nearest dialysis center is, over to Texas. And just, going through that for like a year or two, he just decided, I'm tired. And he stopped going. And it took his body, I want to say maybe a week to kind of go into shock from toxicity, and he passed away.
Wow, that's awful. I'm
But it,
sorry to
it
hear that.
happen it happens more than not, especially with things that can be treated, like with diabetes. Some people let it go uncontrolled. High blood pressure, they let it go uncontrolled just because they're tired. They don't want to wait in the doctor's office, or they can't afford the medication. It's just the cycle that goes with that. And when we start pulling back those layers, a lot of times it's coming down to, I don't want to bill. We're real big with that. I don't want to bill, and I just simply can't afford it. Yeah.
All right. Last question I have here is what kind of music do you listen to?
That's the best question you've asked. I listen to everything. I am uh 90s hip hop, which is the best generation. All this trap that y'all listening to, that's my
Hey,
21-year-old daughter.
I don't
And as
listen
soon
to
as that comes on and that mumbling and stuff starts, I'm like, China, my head is hurting. Put something else on. I seriously, I should have had her come on the call with us, but all that, I'm like, what is he even saying? So every now and then I'll take a song, especially if it's Future or one of the Migos, because I've asked her, China, what is a Migo? Well, see, it's three of them and it's a spin-off of Migos. I'm like, And what are their names? Flight, Takeoff, Quavo, who? So it's funny. So I get it. Takeoff, Quavo, and Offset. I'm like, was little somebody take it or whatever. So, but I listened to some of it. I am a Cardi B fan. I love Nicki. I'm all about my verses, the cadence, the beat. Going back to my time, definitely we're talking about NWA. We're talking about Cube, Lil Kim, Biggie. That's my goat. Always will be. Jay-Z, just that whole genre right there of just great hip hop. That's what's on my Spotify. When we turn up in the house as the old people, as they call us, that's what we blast on our Bluetooth system. I'm still with my boy bands from the 90s. I'm still New Edition. I'm still New Kids on the Block. Just all of this is on my playlist. Back in the day, see, the problem with this generation is y'all don't have any bands, any boy bands. There is no Boys to Men for this generation. There is no Jodeci, just another goat of mine. None of that. I've even listened to just pop, Britney Spears. We go back to Debbie Gibson. See, I told you I'm old. Going all the way back to these people. I even like country, but I like old school country. I'm like Garth and Reba. Like that's my entire genre with that. So I even throw some classical in there every now and then. I like my Bach, I like my Beethoven, I like my jazz. So my playlist is pretty extensive. So yeah.
Do you like Eminem?
Love him. That is the GOAT right there. Yes. I've liked him since he came out, and Stand. And I have a funny story with that. My husband is like a huge M fan, and we actually had went to a wedding a couple of years ago, and on he didn't turn his ringer off, so we're in the church, and the music is getting ready to start, and all of a sudden Stan starts playing in the middle of this church. That part where Dodie comes in, please don't go wondering why. That part, and I'm like, turn your phone off. So he's trying to reach into his jacket, trying to get it to turn off, and like everybody, like across the rows, have turned around and looked at us. I just scooted away from him, like I don't know this man at all. I don't know him at all. So, but
Oh my
yes,
God.
love him. Do 50. Give me anybody from New York. I'm West Coast DJ Quick. I'm Too Short. Oh my God, MOB, really? Florida, Luke, 95 South? Yes, 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 yes.
Do you like any rock or heavy metal music?
I do. In my playlist, I have Bon Jovi, I have Tears for Fears, I have what
Okay.
was the one group? It's Def Leppard. That's the
Uh,
word that I'm looking for. Definitely love my Def Leppard. Occasional ACDC song. It's the one group, and I can't call their name. They sing "Girls, Girls, Girls."
Motley Crue.
Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Love a fan. They're also on my playlist as well.
Or you like the old stuff from the
I
80s?
told you
Like,
that I
yeah.
am 44 years old, so absolutely, we have the best music ever.
That's not wrong. Like most of the music I listen to is from late 80s. I mean, no, not late 80s, late 90s, early 2000s. So
Yeah.
like Eminem's my favorite music
Yes.
artist of all time. But I listen to a lot of Korn and Linkin Park and Limp Bizkit and
I
stuff
do
like
like
that.
Linkin
So yeah,
Park. Yeah,
yeah,
and I like corn. I like the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So yes, yes, Californication. I had that on the other day. Yeah.
that's cool.
Yes,
Well,
Hootie and
thank
the
you.
Blowfish.
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, thank you for coming on the show. Where can we find you on social media, and what is your campaign website?
It's all one. It's Danyell for Congress. DanyellForCongress.com. Danyell for Congress on Twitter. Danyell for Congress on Instagram. Danyell for Congress on TikTok.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Danyell for Congress on Instagram. And my email, I don't know if you would guess it or not, Danyell for Congress at gmail.com.
All right. Good luck on the campaign trail. Thanks for
Thank
coming
you.
on.
I appreciate that, Gregory. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and thank you for having me on the show.